Hi, this is History with Dan, and this is a video about crows, crocuses, and a house in Hartford that looked like a castle. 120 years ago, Washington Street in Hartford was very different from what we see today. It was lined with trees. It was primarily a residential street of single-family homes that were owned by some of the wealthiest and most prominent citizens in Hartford, particularly those associated with politics as well as business. In fact, for a while it was called Governor's Row because a number of governors lived there. Well, an incident occurred there that was reported in the Hartford Courant on August 7th, 1901. The headline is, "Blackbirds Not Afraid. Noises Fail to Scare Them Away. Colonel Jewell Tries Fireworks on Washington Street. The Plague of Birds Has Returned." And the story reads, Colonel Charles A. Jewell had a fireworks display in front of his residence, number 140 Washington Street, last evening, which somewhat surprised passers-by and his neighbors, who know not the cause thereof. Down the street further, people, including women of the households, were seen slapping slippers together, banging shingles and other pieces of wood with flat surfaces, and slapping folds of newspapers together, all to make a noise. Except for the reputation that residents of that famous tree-lined avenue have for being sound in mind, passerby might have supposed that they were a little loony, for there was nothing apparently abroad to cause such demonstrations, and the manifestations seemed too vigorous for the purpose of shooing away mosquitoes or flies, and many who saw the noisy operations were at a loss to account for them. Investigation showed that the noise, which has been going on for the past week or more, was made to scare away the crow blackbirds, which for 2 or 3 summers have made the handsome trees on Washington Street their regular night roosting place, especially on the east side near the corner of Park Street. They have proved a dirty nuisance to the owners of the trees and to those who have had to pass under them, and have returned this season to plague the people. Thousands of the birds, in droves which almost amount to clouds, nightly settle in the trees and caw for all their relations to follow. They are as restless as the small boy in summertime, and never seem to sleep. But they got a surprise party last night when Colonel Jewell treated them to a pyrotechnic display with rockets. They recognized that it was too late for a 4th of July celebration and couldn't tell what it was about. Some of them evidently thought it was a celebration on account of their return and soared around, expressing their pleasure and gratification by monotonous tones of cawing, which were almost as bad as their presence in the trees. Others seemed to fear the earth was burning up in their neighborhood and flew away, possibly to return when the colonel's stock of fireworks became exhausted. So that's the end of the story, but I can tell you from the years that I worked at the Harry Beecher Stowe Center in Hartford, that area in Nook Farm was actually a roosting place for crows as well, and they certainly would cover all the trees, and it seemed like there were hundreds of them all around, and the museum there also tried to shoo them away, and with equal lack of success, I would have to say. So the story mentions Colonel Charles A. Jewell, and he lived in a house at 140 Washington Street. So here's the bird's eye view of Hartford in 1877. And zooming in, you can see the state capitol on the right, and then Washington Street. Here's the block that goes from near the Capitol south towards Park Street, and the Jewell house was right in that block, and the house actually had a castle-like appearance. And here's what the house looked like. So it really did look like a castle. And the history of the house is interesting. It actually, earlier, it was numbered 80 Washington Street, and that was later changed to 140. And the house was built in 1841. It was designed by the architect Henry Austin of New Haven. And it was originally built for two brothers, Elijah and Edmund Kellogg. They were very famous for their lithography company located in Hartford. There was even a book a few years ago published by the Connecticut Historical Society focusing on that company and their many lithographs. And one of the brothers had been to England. He had seen Tudor-style buildings and castles, and so he wanted that recreated for his home in Hartford. And so it was built of brick, but covered with wood and made to resemble a genuine castle. And in the 1850s, for a time, the house was owned by David Wesson, a firearms manufacturer from Springfield. But in 1859, it was purchased by Pliny Jewell. He was the founder of the Jewell Belting Company factory. And I've mentioned him in a previous video. He had four sons who would eventually join him in the business. One of his sons, Pliny Jewell Jr., I mentioned in my video, Forgotten Frogs of Hartford, because he had a house on Farmington Avenue, and he was famous for feeding the frogs that he kept in his pond there. Well, two of his brothers would live in the house on Washington Street. For a while, Marshall Jewell lived with his father in the house. He would also move to Farmington Avenue and would later become governor of Connecticut. The other brother mentioned in the story about the crows was Colonel Charles A. Jewell. He inherited the house after his father died in 1869, and he himself lived there until he died in 1905. And he's perhaps most famous for Camp Jewell of the YMCA, which is named for him, and he helped to found that. Now, there's another story relating to the time when Colonel Jewell lived in the house a few years after the story about the crows, and it appeared in the Hartford Courant on April 12th, 1904, and the headline reads, "Lawn Full of Crocuses. Colonel Charles A. Jewell planted 4,000 bulbs." The lawn of Colonel Charles A. Jewell on Washington Street is covered with crocuses and presents a beautiful sight. Such a large number of the handsome spring plants has never been seen before here, and they attract a good deal of attention. The lawn is a deep one, and the crocuses extend from the house to the sidewalk. A few years ago, as Colonel Jewell was driving on Asylum Avenue, he saw about 100 crocuses in a bed. He admired them and decided to have some on his lawn. About that time, he received a circular from a Pittsburgh florist who said he could furnish bulbs for the fall if he received the order by the middle of the summer. Colonel Jewell ordered 2,000 bulbs, and they were planted 3 years ago in October. He was disappointed in the number that came up in the spring, and 2 years ago he ordered 2,000 more. This spring is the first time that the flowers came up in large numbers. It is estimated that there are over 3,000 of them. Colonel Jewell said he did not know how many years they would continue to come up, but he was satisfied with the number he has at present and does not intend to plant any more. After Colonel Jewell's death in 1905, his widow lived in the house a few more years until she also passed away. The house was then torn down in 1911 to make way for a new house on the same site, which also has since been demolished, sadly. Well, thank you for watching this video, and if you want to learn more about vanished buildings of Hartford, you can read my book, Vanished Downtown Hartford. You can also visit my website, historicbuildingsct.com, and don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this in the future. Thank you.